Mark. I feel like it's my home away from home. I absolutely love it here. And I have to tell you, as a sensitive person, it's so relaxing and calming being here compared to in the United States and a lot of other countries. So be very glad that you're residing in this country. I love it here. So we're going to talk tonight, sensitive boys and men practical strategies. All of the suggestions that I'll offer during the talk won't necessarily work for everyone, but many sensitive males which have followed many of the suggestions have greatly benefited. So every sensitive person is different. So what may work for one person may not work for another. So it's important to follow what works for you and what you try with your child if you have a child who's sensitive. And feel free to ask any questions during the talk. And like Martin mentioned, if you want to write a little note and give it to me during the break, I can answer those questions too. And also be available after the talk if you want. So, actually, I'm just curious, how many people here are fairly familiar with the trait of high sensitivity? So, it looks like most of you. So just to review, approximately 20% of every population has the trait of high sensitivity. And what's interesting is equally divided between males and females. Although in most cultures, the men and the boys usually repress their feelings because in a lot of cultures it's considered not as beneficial for males to have the trait of sensitivity. But the truth of the matter is 1 out of every 5 boys and 1 out of every 5 men are highly sensitive, even though in a lot of cultures, males try to repress that truth. So if you're sensitive, you frequently have trouble screening out stimuli, too much stimuli, energy coming in. You can be overwhelmed by noise, crowds, and time pressure. Sensitive people tend to be sensitive to pain, and they usually don't like violent movies. We're made uncomfortable by bright lights like those, and strong smells and changes in our life. And what's funny is I gave a workshop back in the San Francisco area where I live, and it took about 10 minutes. I wanted everyone to feel comfortable, and people say, well, can you make a space here for me and to close this curtain? And it's okay because it's a little hard if you're sensitive because we're more sensitive to all this stimuli, lights, noise, crowds, how things are set up. And also changes in our lives. And that's very important, especially for sensitive boys, sensitive girls. You know, if they're in a classroom, there's a change, or you're moving to a new place. If you're non-sensitive, they kind of go with the flow. But if you're sensitive, it's more of a big thing to make that change. Many, if not most sensitive people, deeply exhibit more emotional sensitivity than the non-sensitive person. However, again, it really, really varies. Every sensitive person's different. Some things won't bother some sensitive people, and other things will bother other sensitive people, and vice versa. So, most sensitive boys tend to pause to reflect before acting, and wouldn't be risk takers. The tendency can easily be understood as demonstrating as it's a healthy caution. So it's nothing wrong in waiting. So for example, let's say you have a boy who's going to a new classroom, kindergarten, nursery school, and the sensitive boy will stay back and check out, is it safe? What does it look like? They want to get the lay of the land, and that's totally normal. But unfortunately, a lot of people think there's something wrong with someone who doesn't want to just jump right in. So this is very important to realize that it's a normal trait to pause and reflect rather than being a risk taker. In most societies, boys are frequently encouraged to engage in risky behavior and are praised when they do so, while more cautious behavior is regarded with shame. The sensitive person is conscientious, they're sensitive to their environment, they're socially aware of what's going on around them. And although some cultures categorize sensitive boys as being unusual or not normal. It's a totally neutral trait. And there's more challenges for boys and men who are sensitive than females, because frequently males are thought of to be, you have to be aggressive and thick-skinned and in self-control, which is sort of the opposite of what a lot of sensitive men are. And most boys are taught from an early age to act tough and repress your emotions. And unfortunately, when a lot of boys growing up don't conform to the boy code and instead show their gentleness or emotions, they're kind, they say how they feel, oh, I'm afraid. When they do that, frequently boys, hopefully it's not as bad in Denmark as it is in North America and some other countries that are a little more macho, but they tend to get humiliated. And if boys express emotions like fear, anxiety, or sadness, they're commonly seen as feminine, and the adults and other children in their lives typically treat them as though their emotions are abnormal for a boy. So this is an interesting study. So given the norms in most societies where boys are supposed to repress their emotions and the girls are supposed to be more emotional, there was a study shown that newborn boys are actually more emotionally reactive than newborn girls. And they shows baby boys cry more than baby girls when they're frustrated. Yet by the age of 4 or 5, most boys suppress all their feelings except anger, because anger is the one emotion that males in most society are allowed to exhibit culturally. So when males are aggressive and silent, it's accepted as normal. But yet when they express normal levels of fear, anxiety, sadness, frequently they're treated as something's wrong with them. So the effect on men having to conform to wear a tough guy mask to repress their emotions creates suffering on both a personal and societal level. And it's very devastating for the sensitive boy, who has a harder time than the average boy in repressing their emotions. Because basically in most cultures, males have to feel like they have to repress their feelings. They can't say, I'm afraid, I'm sad, I'm scared. And it's hard for anyone, because then you become sort of a half a human being. There's a wonderful movie, and there's also a Facebook website called The Mask You Live In. And it's amazing. It's all about how boys from an early age have to put on a mask and act differently than who they really are, and what it does to men in society.
What is it called?
It's called The Mask You Live In. And if you go to Facebook, The Mask You Live In, you can see the page, and you can also Google it and get them and watch the movie for free, and it's wonderful. So here's what's interesting. For society to really function at an optimal level, at a really good level, there has to be a balance between the sensitive men and the non-sensitive men. And yes, we need our warriors and the people who want to be generals and the corporate executives, but you also need the artists, the musicians, the counselors. Sensitive males have an important mission, which is to balance the aggressive behavior of some non-sensitive males who treat humans, animals, and Mother Nature in a callous, negative way. Since 80% of non-sensitive males are hardwired neurologically to behave in a different manner than the 20%, highly sensitive boys frequently don't feel like they fit in with the majority of the boys. And then they end up internalizing the false belief there's something wrong with them because they behave differently than the other kids in their class, the other boys in their class. And sensitive as well as non-sensitive boys begin to believe that gentleness, emotionality, and a tendency toward getting excited, expressing your feelings is abnormal and wrong. And this trend is reflected in my in-depth research of 30 highly sensitive men that I put together for my book, The Strong Sensitive Boy. And most of the men I interviewed felt like they didn't fit in because they weren't risk takers and they had a hard time with too much noise or stimulation. Most boys like to play in a rough and tumble manner and enjoy watching combat scenes, violence in movies and television. But 85% of the sensitive men I interviewed avoided fighting as a boy, and 90% didn't like watching violence particularly, people killing each other. But what happens is in some societies, if boys don't fight, then they're humiliated, which contributes to having low self-esteem. So one thing I like to start off with is all the positive qualities of a sensitive person. So the sensitive person, male or female, is compassionate, they're gentle, they can be a peacemaker. When I interview people, this is, yeah, people think I'm a peacemaker. I always like to have tranquility between people when they're fighting. They're concerned about treating animals in a kind way. Sensitive people are very responsible. That's why we make great employees and we're good students. We follow through. We're conscientious. We're very creative. And I'll go as far as to say about 75 to 80% of all musicians and artists, dancers, writers are highly sensitive because we have that tendency to pick up energy and we just are very creative. So without sensitive people, there'd be very few artists and musicians, songwriters, writers, so it's amazingly wonderful. Has any of you seen the movie Sensitive? It's called Sensitive the Movie. I know one person has seen it. You have seen it, yeah, 2 or 3 people have seen it. All you go to is sensitivethemovie.com, and I highly recommend it. And Will Harper, who's a famous Hollywood producer, director, came to Denmark, and one of the people in the audience, son was in the movie, Carson's son, and Martin and Lisa, his wife, were in the movie. Yours truly here was in it. But it's an amazing movie, and for a lot of people who don't like to read or want to go through all the books, in about 90 minutes, you get to really know what being sensitive is like. And in the movie, there's a songwriter named Alanis Morissette, and she's in America, she's one of the most popular singers and songwriters. And she talks about what it was like as a sensitive person who's a creative songwriter and singer with millions of fans. So the movie is fascinating, sensitivethemovie.com. You can download it, and it's just amazing. So I got off on a little tangent about the creativity, but that's good. So here's another great thing. We're able to feel love deeper than non-sensitive people. So we experience love on a deep, because we have these deep emotions, we can experience love. And we're very intuitive. You'll see most people who are psychic, and pick up energy, can figure things out, or they're very sensitive people are very intuitive. And actually, in the olden days, we would be called the priestly advisor and held in high esteem. So the king would have their shaman or priestly advisor who would be a sensitive person who would kind of tune in and know, oh, is this safe? Should we go to war here? How should we help? Can we help the people in our kingdom? So you'll see that sensitive people are very intuitive. They pick up subtle energy. Wonderful. We feel a connection with all beings. And we tend to have deep spiritual experiences, deep dreams, different realizations on a spiritual level. So as you can see, all these amazing qualities, unfortunately, are repressed, especially in boys growing up. Because in a lot of societies, boys aren't supposed to have these different qualities.